that we'll be discussing are bank records, although I do have them on slides. I realize that it may be difficult for people to see what's on the slide, so I also have them in individual booklets.
Fine.
Already provided copies to counsel, Mr. Argie, and also providing a copy to the witness in the court.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Continue questioning, Judge.
You may.
Investigator Amatucci, one of the topics that you discussed before the lunch break is an interview you had with the defendant at the hospital in Connecticut. And among the topics that the defendant spoke to you about were financial difficulties that he was having.
Yes.
I want to start going through some bank records, which are State's Exhibit 5, which I read into evidence of certification prior to lunch. And you've reviewed some of the bank records before?
Yes.
I want to begin with the bank records for William Argie, the defendant. How many separate bank accounts did he have at the beginning of 2019?
2.
Mr. Argie?
Yes.
He had 3, right?
Three total accounts, yes.
Now, with respect to the bank records, do they include notices of insufficient funds sent to the defendant regarding his bank accounts?
Yes.
So I want to take a look at this slide from State's Exhibit 5. And for those who are looking through their books, on the upper right-hand corner, everything is paginated. And this is page 31. What we're looking at here, is this an example of a notice of insufficient funds sent to the defendant?
Yes.
And what is a notice of insufficient funds?
When an individual attempts to withdraw more funds than they have in their accounts, they'll get a notice saying that there are insufficient funds to pay whatever that cost is.
Now, in addition to the booklet, I also gave you a copy of State's Exhibit 5, which are the actual records. You have them right there?
Yes.
So I'd like you to look, starting at page 8 of those records, and again, the page numbers are on the upper right-hand corner. And starting from 8, let me finish asking the questions so you know the parameters. Going from pages 8 to 41 in the bank records, not the records that individual jurors have, about how many separate notices of insufficient funds were sent to the defendant regarding his accounts for the 7-month period from September 2018 to March of 2019. So if you could look at pages 8 through 41 of the records and count those up for us.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 34.
34?
Yes.
And that's over the 7-month period from September of 2018 to March of 2019, 34 separate notices of insufficient funds?
Yes, sir.
How many of those, about 3 dozen notices of insufficient funds, were sent in the roughly 8-week period from January 25th to March 22nd of 2019? And for that, I'll ask you to refer to pages 31 through 41 of the records. Let me know when you get to page 31.
Yep, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
11?
Yes.
One of those notices is shown page 31, right?
Yes.
And actually, you can refer to the booklet now. I'll take back the records. I don't think you'll be looking at these anymore. What is the date for that notice of insufficient funds on page 31 of the records?
February 14th of 2019.
And as of February 14th, 2019, how far in negative balance was this particular bank account for the defendant?
He was negative $462.44.
When you testified before lunch about your interview with the defendant, one of the topics that he discussed was his financial difficulty, and he specifically brought up problems he was having making truck payments.
Yes.
What brand of truck did the defendant have?
He had I believe, a Ford pickup truck.
We're going to the next slide. Here on page 34 of the records. And what is this record on page 34 of the records?
This is another notice of insufficient funds, Ford Motors for $610.
And with respect to the $610, is that the same amount the defendant talked to you about in the interview he couldn't pay?
Yes.
And what's the date for this notice of insufficient funds for Ford Motor Credit?
This one was February 25th of 2019.
We can now look at page 37 of the bank records. Is this another notice of insufficient funds on page 37?
Yes, it is.
And is this again for a Ford Motor Company?
Yes.
And it again is insufficient on the amount of $610?
Yes.
And what's the date for this notice of insufficient funds?
This one was March 4th of 2019.
So March 4th of 2019, we have another notice of insufficient funds to Ford Motor Credit?
Yes.
I want to turn to two other specific notices of insufficient funds. These are on pages 27 and 29. Again, if the jurors would rather look up, everything is on the slides here, but they're also in your books. So we have two other notices of insufficient funds for pages 27 and 29.
Yes.
And these are dated in January of 2019.
Yes.
So for one of them, we have Clarion Hotel, West Springfield, Massachusetts.
Yes.
And the other one, MGM Springfield, Chandler State, Springfield, Massachusetts.
Yes.
What is MGM Springfield in Massachusetts?
A casino.
And these again are two notices of insufficient funds.
Yes.
I just moved on to the next slide. And I want to turn to the last of those notices of insufficient funds on the defendant's account chronologically. So we're now at page 41 of the bank records. And with respect to this last notice of insufficient funds chronologically, what date do we have here?
This is March 25th of 2019.
And how much was the defendant unable to cover with respect to this notice of insufficient funds on March 25th, 2019?
$19.99.
Turning to the next slide, we're looking now at bank records, page 43. And before, you counted about a separate, 3 dozen separate notices of insufficient funds on the defendant's bank accounts in the several months prior to the victim's death. With respect to this notice of insufficient funds on page 43, if you could please read the notice of negative balance for us at the bottom.
The negative balance was $127.76.
I'm asking you to read the actual notice, please.
Oh, your beyond checking has been negative for 15 consecutive days. Your balance is now negative $127.76, and your available balance is now $127.76 in the negative. Please take action to bring your account current and in good standing. We reserve the right to close the account if it is overdrawn for 45 days.
And when was this notice of negative balance sent to the defendant?
This was on March 6th of 2019.
Now I want to review specific aspects of the defendant's 3 bank accounts for the 3 months preceding his wife's death. So now we'll be looking at January, February, and March of 2019. Let's begin with January. I'll go on to the next slide. And here, for the jurors who may be looking at their books, we're looking at page 107. Again, the time period that we're focusing now is January of 2019. And for that month, what was the beginning and ending balance for the defendant's 3 accounts? And let's begin with the account ending 0024, which is page 107 of the records. According to the records, what was the defendant's beginning balance for that particular account?
$0.
And what was his ending balance?
$1,265.89.
And these are highlighted on the screen that I'm pointing to right now?
Yes, sir.
If we can now go to his second of 3 accounts, this one ending 0021, and we're now at page 106 of the records. And I hear some pages shuffling, so I'll wait before I ask the next question. So again, for this period of January of 2019, for the account ending 0021, what was the defendant's beginning bank account balance and ending bank account balance for this particular account?
$153.64, and the ending was $19.22.
Let's turn to the third of the defendant's 3 bank accounts. And again, we're in that period of January. And for those jurors who may be looking at their books, it's page 102 of the records. So this is for account ending 0020. What were the beginning and ending balances of the defendant's bank account in January for this particular bank account?
The beginning balance was $18.23, and the ending balance was negative $398.44.
Now, going on to this next slide, I want to return to pages 27 and 29 of the records. And among the dozens of notices of insufficient funds that were sent on the defendant's account were these 2 that we just went over a few minutes ago from Springfield and West Springfield, Massachusetts, including MGM. And again, Springfield, West Springfield, Massachusetts, that's where the MGM casino is located.
Yes, sir.
For the defendant's January bank accounts, are there numerous withdrawals of money reflected from this same area in Massachusetts from January 22nd to January 25th of 2019?
Yes.
I'll go to the next slide. And in the booklets, we're on 3 different pages. It's 104, 106, and 108, but all 3 of these pages are on the screen that we're looking at right now, Investigator Amatucci? Yes?
Yes.
And with respect to the numerous withdrawals from the area of Springfield and West Springfield, Massachusetts during this time frame in January, are they all highlighted in the records that we have on the screen for the jurors to see?
Yes, they are.
So as I'm looking at the screen, again, we have 3 separate bank accounts for Mr. Argie's bank. Right?
Yes.
And so the 3 slides that we have are for those 3 separate accounts with here.
Yes.
And each of these highlighted entry, it involves some kind of financial transaction at that Springfield or West Springfield area in January of 2019.
Correct.
So going to the next slide, and what I've done is I've highlighted each of those entries, as well as the amounts of each of those entries. I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of math and approximate if you want, but about how much total was withdrawn from the defendant's bank accounts over those 4 days in January, about 2 months before his wife's death. at locations in Springfield and West Springfield, Massachusetts.
Yep.
And if you want to just verify, I do have an amount at the bottom, if you want to verify that that approximate amount is correct.
Yes, $3,071.54.
And you've actually gone over these particular records before, and you might have done the math before as well.
I have, yes.
So over that less than a week period in the area of Springfield and West Springfield, Massachusetts, in January 2019, over $3,000 was withdrawn from the defendant's bank accounts.
Yes.
Going back to the defendant's interview with you, how did he describe his employment situation at around this time when he withdrew over $3,000 from his bank account?
At that time, he was working per diem down at the urgent care in Massachusetts.
And he also told you in the interview that he was having difficulty making house payments and vehicle payments?
Yes.
I want to go to the next slide, and here we're looking at page 109 of the records. And we're still in that period of January of 2019, correct?
Yes.
So with respect to page 109 of the records, I have highlighted for January 29th, 2019, an ATM withdrawal. You see that at $400?
Yes.
I've also tried to enlarge it on the screen. First, what was the remaining balance on the account after that ATM withdrawal of $400 according to the bank records?
$5.97.
So $400 was withdrawn, leaving a little less than $6 in the account?
Yes.
What was the location for that ATM where the withdrawal of $400 was made?
48 Perimeter Road, which is St. Mary's Bank.
And at the time of the victim's death, she and the defendant were living at 118 West Road in Londonderry?
Yes.
Do you know where a gambling establishment in 2019 by the name of Poker Room in Manchester was located?
Yes.
Was that on Willow Street in Manchester?
Yes.
So the next slide is something that's not in the books. It's a map. And this is State's Exhibit 38. And you've seen this map before?
I have.
And does this map show a direct route of travel between the defendant's house at 118 West Road and that Poker Room Casino located in Manchester?
Yes.
And is it the blue route that's highlighted on the map going northward?
It is.
And along the route, do we have 48 Perimeter Road, the address seen in that bank record?
Yes.
And again, what is located at 48 Perimeter Road, which is between the defendant's house in Londonderry and that casino in Manchester?
ATM machine at St. Mary's Bank.
And St. Mary's Bank is the bank of the records from which we're reviewing right now?
Yes.
So we've reviewed some of the defendant's bank records from January of 2019. Let's now go to February of 2019. And let's begin by doing what we had done for the January bank records, which is reviewing the beginning balance and ending balance for the defendant's three accounts. So the slide I have up now is page 113. I should have noted this earlier, there are a couple of duplicate pages on, in the booklets because there are separate matters that are highlighted. So for this page of 113, what's highlighted is the beginning and ending balance. And what was the beginning and ending balance for this particular account, which is account ending 0024?
The beginning balance was $1,285.89. The ending balance was $163.68.
Now let's go to the second of the defendant's three bank accounts, and now we're on page 112 of the records. Sticking again to the month of February, 112 is the page number. And
Yep.
for account ending 0021, what is the beginning balance and the ending balance?
The beginning balance was $19.22, and the ending balance was 89 cents.
And lastly, let's go over the beginning and ending balances for the defendant's third bank account. And this is page 111 of the records. And this is for account ending 0020. What is the beginning and ending balance for this particular account?
It was negative $398.44 for beginning, and ending was negative $95.76.
So in terms of overall money in the defendant's bank accounts, for February, was it more or less than what we saw in January?
Less.
So it was less in January. We spoke earlier about the poker room in Manchester, the establishment on Willow Street.
Yes.
I want to go back to page 113 of the records. This is a different highlighted page 113. Does this particular highlighted page 113 of the bank record show numerous ATM withdrawals at the Manchester Poker Hall on South Willow Street?
Yes, it does.
And this period, again, is February of 2019?
Yes.
And on what dates were ATM withdrawals made from the poker room in Manchester?
February 1st of 2019.
And how much total was withdrawn from the, how much total was withdrawn from the ATM?
The first withdrawal was $203. The second was $1, looks like a card fee. There was a second withdrawal for $203, and there was another $1 card fee.
So the next slide, we're looking at pages 114 and 115 of the records for February. And for the January records, we reviewed a withdrawal taken at an ATM at 48 Perimeter Road. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Which is on the route from the defendant's home to that poker establishment in Manchester.
Yes.
Do pages 114 and 115 of the bank records, which are now for February, show additional withdrawals taken at that same ATM on Perimeter Road?
Yes.
And are those withdrawals highlighted on the screen and also in your book?
Yes.
And we have 3 separate withdrawals?
Yes.
And what is the total amount for those 3 separate withdrawals? You can go through them individually if you'd like.
Yep, there's, I believe the first one's a $500 withdrawal. The second one, which is February 12th, is a $150 withdrawal. And then there's one on February 28th, that's another $500 withdrawal for a total of $1,150.
So the next slide, I have several pages of bank records up on the projector screen. So this is several pages instead of one page. And I want to direct you to entries in the defendant's bank record showing in-person cash withdrawals. And it's for that roughly 2-month period from December 6th to February 1st at that bank at 48 Perimeter Road. And in your booklet, I believe it's pages 169 through 72 and 176 through 77. So the first page is 169.
Yes.
And does that show in person cash withdrawal?
Yes.
And looking through the book is next page 170, and it continues.
Yes.
So we have on the screen 6 different days of in-person cash withdrawals.
Yes.
The next slide, we have the individual pages on this screen, as well as the money that was dispersed at the bottom of the screen. Can you read that?
I can.
And how much money was taken out from in-person withdrawals?
So $400, $1,000, $800, $1,300, $2,000, and $1,300.
And the next slide, just a little bit of math. How much total was withdrawn in person?
$6,800.
Almost $7,000.
Yes.
And again, according to what the defendant told you in his interview, what was his employment situation?
Per diem.
And he was having financial difficulties.
Correct.
So we've gone over January, we've gone over February, now let's turn to March, the month before his wife's death. And we're going to start here by doing the same thing. Let's go through beginning balance and ending balance. So I'm at page 119 of the records now. And this is for account ending 0024. And if you could tell us the beginning balance and the ending balance for the defendant's bank account for this particular account.
Yes, the beginning balance was $163.68. The ending balance was 99 cents.
And for this next slide, we're looking at page 120 of the records. When was the balance at 99 cents for this account in March?
So this was March 17th.
So as of March 17th, for this particular account in the defendant's name, the balance was 99 cents.
Yeah, so March 16th was the transaction date, and the effect date was March 17th. But yes.
So now let's go to page 118 of the records, and I believe this is where there are duplicate pages in the booklets. Here we're focusing on beginning balance and ending balance. And this is for account ending 0021.
Yes.
So what was the beginning and ending balance of this particular account?
The beginning balance was 89 cents, and the ending balance was $1.
And keeping on page 118, it's highlighted, as of what date was the account at $1?
This was March 16th.
So lastly, let's go to the defendant's third bank account, and this is page 117 of the records. And this is for account ending 0020. According to page 117 of the bank records, for account ending 0020, what was the defendant's beginning balance and ending balance?
Beginning balance was negative $95.76. The ending balance was $191.76.
In the negative.
Correct.
And keeping on page 117, as of what date was it at that negative balance of $191.76?
That was March 22nd, 2019.
So as of March 22nd of 2019, about 2 weeks before the victim's death, approximately what was the total amount in the defendant's three bank accounts? We started with 99 cents, $1, now we have negative $189.77.
Yes.
So
Negative
it's about-
$190 approximately.
So we had gone over multiple ATM and in-person cash withdrawals from the St. Mary's Bank at 48 Perimeter Road in January and February of 2019. We're now looking at page 118 of the records. Is there an additional ATM withdrawal for that same Perimeter Road address at the beginning of March?
Yes.
And that's March 7th, which is highlighted. Again, it's page 118. It's also on the screen.
Yes.
And how much was withdrawn from that ATM on Perimeter Road on March 7th?
$210.
Leaving how much in the account?
$1.94.
So the withdrawal almost emptied out the account at the time?
Yes.
Does this page of the records also show an ATM withdrawal at Chasers in Salem?
Yes.
And those with the withdrawal as well as an associated ATM fee?
Yes.
And how much was withdrawn and on what date was money withdrawn?
So March 5th, $203.95 was withdrawn, and a $1 fee on the same date, March 5th.
And as a result of those two withdrawals, how much money was left in the account?
$3.94.
So that withdrawal, again, almost emptied the account at the time?
Yes.
So we reviewed entries from the defendant's bank records from St. Mary's Bank, focusing on that period of January to March of 2019. Are you aware that the records that we obtained, which are State's Exhibit 5, also included Maureen Argie's bank records?
Yes.
And how many separate accounts were in Maureen Argie's bank?
I believe 2.
There were 2 in the children. How many in Maureen Argie's? Was it just 1?
She had 1.
At the beginning of our review of bank records, for the defendant's bank records, we counted almost 3 dozen separate notices of insufficient funds in that 7 months before the victim's death. Were there any notices of insufficient funds for the victim's individual bank account?
No.
Let's turn to the victim's bank account, Maureen Argie. We'll start with 220 of the records. And we'll do for her records the same, or her records, the same that we did for the defendant's records. We'll start with going over the beginning balance and the ending balance. And again, we only have 1 account here, correct?
Yes.
So again, we're on page 220 of the records. And for Maureen Argie's account, what was the beginning balance and the ending balance?
The beginning balance was $1,546.67, and the ending balance was $1,414.88.
So moving on to the next slide, what we have are pages 221 and 222 of the records. And we have numerous entries on those pages highlighted. Again, they're pages 221 and 22, Maureen Argie's bank records. For the defendant's bank records, we went over numerous entries from January 22nd to the 25th, showing a total of over $3,000 withdrawn in locations in Springfield and West Springfield, Massachusetts. If you can read off the withdrawal activity for the victim's account for that same 4-day period as indicated on pages 221 and 222 of the records. So let's start with January 22nd. Do we have withdrawal?
Yep, there's a withdrawal for Comcast, and this
Are you
was,
familiar with what Comcast is?
yeah, like television.
And then we have for January 22, we have another withdrawal.
Yes, and this was for Nissan,
And you know Nissan to be
Nissan Murano.
also January 22nd withdrawal.
Yep, it looks like a mortgage payment.
And the 4th withdrawal on January 22nd, what do we have?
Market basket,
Which is what?
grocery store.
Then if we go to page 222, we have a withdrawal on the 23rd.
Yes, Circle K,
And what's Circle K?
gas station,
And we have lastly January 25th.
market basket again, grocery store.
Moving to the next slide. This is page 224 of the records. We've now moved to February. And we're now at 224 of the records. And I'd like to do what I've gone over with you before, which is the beginning balance and the ending balance for February for Maureen Argie's bank account.
Yes, so
What's the
the,
beginning balance and the ending balance?
so the beginning balance was $1,414.88, and the ending balance was $2,610.59.
So the balance increased.
It did.
Let's go to page 228 of the records, and that slide that I have on the screen. And we're now going to March of 2019, the month before the victim's death. And on page 224, if you can go over the beginning and the ending balance for the victim's bank account in March.
Yes, the beginning balance was $2,610.59. The ending balance was $2,625.87.
So albeit slightly, we have, again, an increase in the balance for the victim's bank account.
Yes,
And her total account for March for an ending balance is $2,625. Again, about what was the total balance in the defendant's 3 accounts for this ending period of March.
negative $190.
For the defendant's accounts, we went over ATM withdrawals and in-person cash withdrawals totaling about $7,500 in that roughly 6-week period from late January to the beginning of March. Are there any cash or ATM withdrawals from the victim's account from the beginning of January through the end of March?
No,
Do the victim's bank records indicate a debit card that was used in connection with the account to make transactions, for example, at the Market Basket and the Circle K?
yes,
So let's go back to page 222 of the records. And we're still on the victim's bank records here, page 222, and we're back in the period of January. This may be another instance where I have duplicate pages. But if you're looking at the correct one, there are several transactions highlighted with respect to a debit card. Do you see those? Again, we're on page 222 of the records.
yes,
And there are several transactions involving a debit card that are highlighted in the records.
yes,
And are the last 4 digits of that debit card indicated in the bank records?
the 0020.
So we're looking at the same records? It says card and then it has 4 digits. Are you on page 222?
I am, but mine appears to be
And it might
highlighted.
be duplicate pages 222.
Okay,
Maybe I don't have.
No.
That could be the issue. Thank you. So do you see it says card and then it has a 4-digit number?
yes,
And what's that 4-digit number?
0351,
0351?
yes,
So the next slide, we're going to be looking at page 233 of the victim's bank records. Again, this is page 233, and we're in the period now of April. We've gone over January, February, and March. Now we're going over April. And for this page of the bank records, 233, you on that page?
yes,
For April 5th, does it show that the debit card ending 0351 was used anywhere in particular?
yes, at a Dunkin' Donuts in Hudson,
And for how much was that debit card, or for what amount was the debit card utilized?
$8.10.
And you said the location was in Hudson?
Yes,
I believe yesterday the jurors heard a record certification regarding Dunkin' Donuts, which was State's Exhibit 12. The next slide are copies of that certification. It may be difficult to read from where you are, and it's very light. Can you read that, or should you come down and read that?
I can see that one, April 4th of 2019,
Okay. And it says Dunkin',
yes,
and it has a submission date and a funded date.
yep, so that's April 5th of 2019.
And from your own personal experiences, are you aware of transactions that have a transaction date and an actual withdrawal date difference?
Yes,
And what would that be?
it just processed the following day.
Dan, you can read that, you're better eyesight than mine. Can you read the last 4 digits that are on here?
0351,
And is that the same 4 digits that we went over in the victim's bank records?
yes,
And transaction amount, Is that
$8.10
as well?
Yes.
Which is also the amount from the victim's bank records?
Yes.
So the next slide is another page taken from State's Exhibit 2, which are the Dunkin' Donuts records that the jurors received into evidence yesterday through the certification. On this page of the Dunkin' Donuts records, it shows a purchase made on April 4th from that Dunkin' Donuts in Hudson with a card ending 0351.
Yes.
And looking at this page of the records, can you see what time that transaction occurred on April 4th?
Yep, 15:13, which is 3:15 or 3:13 p.m.
On April 4th?
Yes.
And this is Hudson, New Hampshire?
Yes.
And you're familiar with Hudson, New Hampshire generally?
Yes.
Can one travel by vehicle from Londonderry, New Hampshire to Connecticut where the defendant was found by way of Nashua and Hudson, New Hampshire?
Yes.
With respect to the Dunkin' Donuts at Hudson, New Hampshire, 223 Lowell Road,
Yes.
and you looked to determine the travel distance between that Dunkin' Donuts and 118 West Road in Londonderry?
Yes. I believe it was about 20 minutes.
About 20 minutes. So we're going back to surveillance stills that the jurors saw a couple days ago. And this is State's Exhibit 30 for the record. And the time here shows 2:03 p.m.
Yes.
But the jurors heard testimony that the time was about 41 minutes slow. So the actual time is about 2:41 p.m. on April 4th. Adding about 20 minutes to 2:44 p.m. is what time?
A little after 3 o'clock.
And with respect to going back to the transaction at the Dunkin' Donuts, that reflects a transaction time of 3:13 p.m.?
Yes.
According to the records, what was purchased at about 3:13 p.m. on April 4th at that Dunkin' Donuts in Hudson with the victim's debit card?
6-piece hash browns, egg, bacon, and cheese. I had medium iced coffee.
Do you know where the victim was when this purchase on her debit card was made, or what her condition was when this purchase was made?
Yes. She was deceased at a residence.
Now we're going back to the bank records. And this will be the last entry at the bank records that we look at. We're looking now at page 233 at the bank records. These again are the victim Maureen Argie's bank records. Page 233, so we're looking at that April time period again.
Yes.
And we went over the transaction at the Dunkin' Donuts in Hudson. Does it show another transaction?
Yes.
And what transaction does it show in addition to the Dunkin' Donuts transaction?
On April 7th, there's one at the Bellissimo Grand in North Stoning, Connecticut.
And what is the Bellissimo Grand?
It's a hotel.
And where is that hotel in relation to Foxwoods Casino?
It's just down the street, about 5 minutes down the road.
Was the victim's body found in Connecticut, to your knowledge?
No.
Who was found in Connecticut where the victim's debit card was used for a transaction at this hotel by Foxwoods Casino?
William Argie.
One moment. I have no further questions. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you just a couple questions about these bank records.
Sure.
Do you want any help, Counselor?
Sorry?
I'm sorry, did you want any help?
You know what, yes, how about page 221?
What page?
221. So turning to page 221. This is a record of Maureen Argie's bank account.
Yes.
On January 17th of 2019, you see a deposit of $2,700 made into Maureen's bank account.
Yes.
And that deposit came from William Argie's bank account?
Yes.
And turn to page 106 of this same exhibit. And here we are looking at William Argie's bank account, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm sorry, just a minute, so 106.
That's right.
Sorry.
Again, taking a look at the date of January 17th, 2019, you see a deposit of $2,700, or a withdrawal, rather, of $2,700 from William Argie's bank account.
Yes.
And that was deposited to Maureen Argie's bank account?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have for you.
Any redirect? Okay. And may the officer be excused by both sides. Okay, sir, you can step down, you can stay or leave as you choose. Thank you.
Thank you.
State next calls Karen Argie.
And if you could raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to provide this court and jury shall be the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? Yes. Thank you. Please be seated.
I'm sorry, Judge, did you want me to collect?
No, I'm fine.
Sorry about that.
We'll collect the blue books in just a minute. You can put them aside for the moment. Ms. Argie, once you're settled in and close enough to that microphone, if you could state your full name for our court reporter and spell your last name, and then also I'd like to remind you to try to keep your voice up because of the mask you're wearing. Okay? Thank you.
My name is Karen Rebecca Argie, A-R-G-I-E.
And Ms. Argie, based upon what I've heard so far, you're going to have to try to project your voice just a little bit more for everybody to hear you, okay? And I'll try to remind you going forward if I think it's getting low, and I don't mean to be a pain, but I'm trying to make sure a record is kept. Thank you.
You're the defendant's sister,
Yes.
and Maureen was your friend.
Yes.
For about how long had you known Maureen up until her untimely death in April 2019?
Well over 15 years in my college years, I'd say.
So you met in college?
When I was in college, yes, we met.
And how would you describe your relationship with Maureen?
She was my sister. I loved her.
Did you keep in regular contact with Maureen over the many years that you were friends with her?
Of course, yes.
And how did you keep in contact with Maureen?
Through family gatherings, holidays, just general check-ins.
Those general check-ins, would they include phone calls and text messages back and forth?
Yes.
What kind of activities would you do with Maureen over the years?
Mostly things that involved my niece and nephew, or family. You want something specific?
No, that's
Okay.
that's sufficient.
Okay.
The jurors saw a text, I believe, yesterday that made reference to Mo. Who's Mo?
Mo is Maureen, it's what we called her.
From your interactions with Maureen, what you saw, did she have any long-term health or medical issues?
No, not at all.
Was she ever hospitalized for illness or medical condition during your friendship with her, other than that related to her pregnancies with her 2 kids?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Over the many years that you knew Maureen, that you spoke with Maureen, that you interacted with Maureen, how would you describe for us her general demeanor?
Maureen was very grounded. She had a calmness about her. She was gentle and very kind. She was very sensible and practical. And she was a wonderful mother.
Based on your many interactions with Maureen, your many conversations with her over the years, at any point in the many years that you knew her, did you ever have any concern that she may try to harm herself?
No, never.
With respect to Maureen, based on your interactions with her over the years in various social settings, with family, would you agree with the following statement, Maureen drank a lot?
No, I wouldn't agree with that.
Over the years that you were friends with Maureen, did you see her interact with her children, Ella and Gavin?
Of course.
And how so?
In every way a great mom would. She hosted the parties, she picked them up from sporting events, she attended everything they were a part of. She was always there.
In addition to seeing Maureen interact with her children, would she talk to you about her kids?
Sure.
Would that be a regular topic of conversation for Maureen?
Yeah.
From what you saw with Maureen and her kids, was she a loving mother,
Yes, very much.
an attentive mother?
Yes.
Was she a committed mother?
A committed mother?
Yes.
Yes.
Did she care and provide for her children that you saw?
Yes.
From what you saw of Maureen's interactions with her children, discussions that you had with her, including discussions the day before her death, did she have any intention of leaving her kids?
No, quite the opposite. We were talking about how we were going to continue our lives and what we were going to do for the kids. We were talking about where we were going to live, how we were going to move forward. We even talked about which rooms the kids would go into.
And I want to talk more about those discussions you had with Maureen the last day of her life later on. Right now, I do need to ask you some questions about your brother, the defendant. With respect to your relationship with him, did you grow up in the same household?
Yes.
Did you maintain contact with the defendant through adulthood?
Yes.
And how so generally?
We check in every now and again. As adults, we had our own separate lives, but we saw each other on the holidays and birthdays.
From the time that you spent with the defendant, who did you know to be his friends in 2018, 2019, around that time?
His best friend, as far as I know, was a gentleman named Dan LaRochelle. He had a friend named Ray. He had a friend named Tank, I believe. That's all I can think of.
Within your family, who was the defendant closest with?
With a friend or a family?
Family.
Probably my mother.
How would you describe your mother's relationship with the defendant?
Doting.
Excuse me?
Doting.
After Maureen's death, did investigators attempt to interview you?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Sure. After Maureen's death, did investigators try to speak with you, to interview you?
Yes.
Did you initially agree to speak with investigators?
Yes.
Did you follow through with your intent to speak with investigators initially?
I don't remember.
You do remember talking to investigators and also speaking to the, well, not talking to investigators, but speaking to the grand jury? Do you recall that?
Yes.
And would reviewing some of your transcript from that grand jury proceeding potentially refresh your recollection on this topic?
Sure.
So counsel, we're at pages 15 and 16. Judge, would you like to approach?
You may.
So what I'm showing you is a transcript of your grand jury testimony taken in this case. And what I'll ask you to do is read to yourself pages 15 and 16, but feel free to read whatever you want beforehand and whatever you want to read afterwards. When you're done, if you can just look over so I know that you're done and I can ask some follow-up questions, okay?
Okay. It's all read.
You all set?
So the questions I had asked if you, did investigators attempt to interview you? You said they had. You said that you initially agreed to speak with investigators. And my question was, did you follow through with your intent? You said you can't recall. Reviewing those portions of the grand jury transcript, does that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
And what happened? Did you follow through with your expressed intent to talk to investigators?
No.
And why not?
I was told that I was going to, I was told that I could, I was told that I could talk to a lawyer, but not without my mom's consent.
Who told you that?
My mom.
Did your mother ever get you a lawyer so that you could speak with the police who are investigating your friend's death?
No.
After Maureen's death, do you recall asking your mother to ask her son, the defendant, what happened to Maureen?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. After Maureen's death, do you recall yourself asking your mother to ask the defendant what happened to Maureen?
Yes. I asked her if he had talked to her, if she knew what was going on.
Well, let me just get to this question. Do you recall your mother's response when you asked her to ask the defendant what happened?
Objection, you say.
Yes.
We can-
That was a yes or no, so I'm going to allow that question.
Well, the follow-up question is, what did
Okay.
mother say? So,
Com- Questions withdrawn at this point.
did you ultimately answer questions in connection with the investigation into your friend's death before a grand jury?
Yes.
And after providing testimony in the grand jury, did you allow investigators to look at your cell phone and download various messages and content from your cell phone,
Yes.
including
And
communication?
I'm sorry, I'm just going to ask the witness to keep her voice up a little bit more. Sorry. Thank you.
Did that include communications between the defendant and you by text message?
Yes.
And on the subject of cell phones, with respect to both the defendant and Maureen, did you communicate with each by cell phone?
Yes.
So looking at State's Exhibit 42, which is a number chart, it may be difficult for you to see, but at the top it has your name and it has a telephone number 203-6299. Is that your cell phone number in
Yeah.
early 2019?
Yes.
I don't know if you can see these numbers as well, but for Maureen Argie, it has 978-884-4418. You familiar with that cell phone number?
Yes.
The defendant, your brother, 603-845-7815. Does that sound familiar?
He had a lot of phone numbers, but I believe that's one of them.
And also, your mother, Brenda Quinn, it has a number associated with her, 603-762-0602. Does that sound like a number associated with your mother?
Yes.
With respect to the defendant's cell phone, you said that he changed it a number of times. Do you recall him changing the number to this at the beginning of 2019?
I wouldn't know. I'm sorry.
Are you familiar with an email address that the defendant used back in 2019?
Yes.
I want to show you something from State's Exhibit 7, which the jurors heard about earlier today. Email address me4pa@comcast.net. Are you familiar with that email address?
Yes.
And is that one of the defendant's email addresses?
Yes.
So I need to ask you about your friend's relationship with your brother. And let's focus on late 2018 going into 2019. What was the status of the marriage between Maureen and the defendant based on your conversations with them?
Their marriage was disintegrating, was filled with hatred and malice.
When you say hatred and malice, was that a two-way street?
No.
Hatred and malice expressed from whom to whom?
From my brother to Mo.
I want to show you a text message sent by the defendant to you in September of 2018. It was found on your cell phone, the information you provided to investigators. It may be difficult. Can you see that from there? States Exhibit
So,
46.
I'm sorry.
Give me a moment, I can.
Sorry, the record,
No.
it's my job to make sure the record's okay. You just have to answer yes or no. I saw you shake your head no, but if you could verbalize your answer.
No.
So no, thank you.
So States Exhibit 46 is the same exhibit that's on the screen. So we have Monday, September 10th, getting a divorce. This is from your brother,
Yes.
and this was in September of 2018.
Yes.
What he expressed to you, getting a divorce, was this a new topic?
No.
What did you personally observe in the relationship and interaction between the defendant and Maureen? And I know this may be difficult, but it's important for everybody to know.
In what regards?
What did you see with respect to their interactions, their treatment towards one another, their relationship? You saw things, right?
Yes.
Excuse me. Sorry. Someone's phone or alarm is going off.
I saw many instances of unkindness towards Maureen. I saw many instances of abandonment, neglect. I saw many instances of domineering. I even confronted him about one time in particular at his house while I was painting. Maureen seemed to ignore it a lot, made excuses a lot. Focused on her children a lot.
So this is tough, right?
Yes,
This is your brother on trial, right?
yes.
It's your close friend, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I'm sorry, but I have to ask you what you saw in terms of the relationship between the defendant and Maureen. You talked about negative treatment. Again, was this a two-way street? Was it a one-way street?
One weekend in particular, I came over to help my brother and Maureen paint their kitchen. And while I was there, my brother acted irrational and paranoid and started verbally abusing Maureen to the point where he kept her down in the basement for hours, just berating her verbally. I'd never seen anything like it. It was, to me, very disgusting behavior, so I confronted my brother later on in that day about it.
In addition to seeing your brother's poor treatment of your friend Maureen, did he talk to you negatively about and towards Maureen?
Yes.
Was this a single conversation or discussion that the defendant had with you about Maureen? Or was it something repeatedly over time?
No, it was repeatedly through phone conversations or through texts or through meetings at places, restaurants, whatnot.
Ultimately, did you attempt to end communication with your brother, the defendant?
Yes,
Why?
because I thought he was sick.
So my next question, I would like you not to go into general characteristics, please. But what are some of the things you remember the defendant talking to you about, his feelings towards Maureen and his relationship with her?
He would talk about how he blamed her for anything going negatively in his life. He would constantly discuss money issues and how she was holding him back from getting more money, how she wasn't making enough money, how she held him back from his dream of moving into a large house on a golf course. He blamed her for not having an active sex life.
So one of the things that you talked to the defendant blamed Maureen for was money. Was that also discussed in terms of the divorce and money?
Yeah, he made many comments along the lines of when he gets divorced, she'd never see any money over his dead body.
Anything else that you recall?
No.
So, Ms. Argie, I know you talked about individual statements, but again, was this a single conversation? Was this a single statement? Or are these examples of things the defendant would repeatedly talk about?
No, he would go on rants quite often. Gibberish, threats, to the point where I stopped believing that he knew what he was talking about. He would be just so angry. He wouldn't make sense.
Around March of 2018, did you and family members and friends of the defendant confront him, have an intervention?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of that intervention?
The purpose was to help him with his gambling problem and his alcohol problem. Really, we just wanted to discuss those two matters at that point.
And who besides yourself do you recall being at that intervention?
my mother, my sister, all of Billy's friends. Dan Larichelle was there.
What was your brother's response to that confrontation that you, his close friends, family members had with him?
He was quiet for most of the time. And then towards the end, he got very angry and started blaming Maureen. It was all Maureen's fault and how much he hated her.
Was that something new that you heard from your brother?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Was that something new that you heard from your brother?
No.
From your observations of interactions between him and Maureen after that intervention, did his behavior that you observed towards Maureen stop?
No.
So at the time of Maureen's death in April of 2019, where were you living and who were you living with?
I was living with Brenda Quinn, my mother.
Where was that generally?
In Manchester on Valentine Drive.
I want to turn your attention to the calendar, States Exhibit 91. I want to turn your attention to Thursday, April 4th. That's when Maureen was found in her bedroom. Later that day, did you meet your mother and Maureen's children at a restaurant?
Yes.
Over dinner, did you attempt to call Maureen on her cell phone?
Yes.
What happened when you attempted to call your friend?
There was no answer.
Was that unusual for Maureen not to answer her cell phone?
Yes.
Did both you and your mother also attempt to contact the defendant by cell phone?
Yes.
Were those efforts to contact the defendant successful?
No.
Were you and your mother also in contact with your sister Kelly while unsuccessfully trying to contact Maureen and the defendant?
Yes.
Without going into specific discussions as to what was said, what was decided when everybody was unable to contact Maureen and the defendant?
That we should go look for her. That's how abnormal that was.
And later that night, did you learn that Maureen was dead?
Yes.
And from whom did you hear that from?
My mother.
So we went over the telephone number chart and the cell phone number, and the defendant's cell phone number as well. Were you shown phone records from States Exhibit 43, which is a cell phone communications chart that the jurors have seen before? Were you shown these records before by me showing a telephone call or telephone calls between you and your brother on March 29th, the week before Maureen's death?
Yes.
And the records show a phone call lasting, or phone calls lasting over an hour, right?
Yes.
And did you also review several text messages that you sent to your mother minutes after these telephone calls between you and your brother on March 29th?
Yes.
In those text messages, did you relay to your mother some of what the defendant told you in that telephone conversation that you wrote to your mother you had with the defendant?
Yes.
So I want to show you States Exhibit 94. You have seen these before with me, right?
Yes.
And are those the text messages between you and your mother, Ms. Quinn, after the documented phone calls between you and your brother?
Yes.
And where did those text messages come from?
My mother.
Physically, the photographs, for example. Where did the photographs, are those among the photographs you allowed investigators to take of your cell phone?
Oh, yes.
Sitting here today, do you recall having any phone conversation with the defendant that close in time to your friend's death?
I don't recall, no.
And you and I went over these questions before, right?
Yes.
And when I asked you before, you didn't recall this particular telephone call, right?
No, I've had many phone conversations. I just don't remember that one.
Reviewing your own text messages to your mother from March 29th, do you have any doubt that such a lengthy telephone conversation between you and your brother occurred on March 29th?
No.
And again, can you recall specifically what the defendant talked with you about on those phone calls on March 29th?
No.
And you reviewed those text messages with me before, right? Yes?
Yes.
And did reviewing those text messages that you wrote to your mom refresh your recollection as to what the defendant said during those telephone calls?
They were all negative. I blocked it out. They're all, the phone conversations weren't pleasant ones. I many times would just hold the phone out because I just couldn't listen to it anymore.
When you wrote those text messages to your mother detailing some of what the defendant told you in his conversation with you on March 29th, was that conversation with him still fresh in your mind at that point in time during the text messages with your mom?
I'm sure it must have been.
Well, you discussed specific details with your mom, right?
Yes.
And did the text messages you sent accurately reflect your knowledge of what the defendant told you during the telephone calls?
Yes.
In those text messages that I showed you, which is State's Exhibit 94 for identification, those are the text messages that you sent to your mother shortly after speaking with the defendant on March 29th, right?
Yes.
So Judge, although they are for identification, I'd like to publish them now under 8035, past recollection recorded.
Any objection?
No.
I'll allow it.
So, Judge, it's about 15 or 20 minutes left.
Okay, why don't we take the afternoon recess, and then when we come back, we'll resume. Please use this time to stretch your legs and use the restroom. Ms. Archie, you can step down if you'd like before the jury starts.
All right.
Or not, you can stay there too, it's fine.